Something changed in episode 6 of Bocchi the Rock. Now, it certainly wasn't quality. I've been loving the journey of Hitori and Kisoku Band as they contend both with their unique personalities and flaws, all to the backdrop of a realistic depiction of the underground music scene here in Tokyo. It certainly wasn't the humour, as the torrent of quirky dialogue and artistically stylised gags served up a sea of grins and even a couple of belly laughs in yet another lively episode. No, it was that Bocchi the Rock's sixth outing, slightly confusingly named 8 Views, changed both the setting and, more importantly, the framing of Bocchi's journey. Where episode 5 ended on the familiar stage of Starry, with the familiar cast of Kisoku Band embracing after joyously passing the challenge set by Nijika's sister, episode 6 is mostly set in an unfamiliar pedestrian area, with the only other character of note being a new one, and one hiding a very different perspective. But to understand why this caricature drunk hides one of Bocchi the Rock's most touching and deep insights into musicianship, we need to go back to the start and set the scene. So rewind back to the beginning with me, where the episode itself starts with a recap of the series so far, one that plays gorgeously into the visual comedy style of Bocchi the Rock, a style that has us often flipping from the beautifully humble real-world settings to crazy visual metaphors that convey Bocchi's inner feelings. The giggle-inducing introduction plays on that wonderfully, showing past events that we've watched as the audience, but deliberately oversimplifying and over-dramatising them as though it were being recounted by a friend desperately trying to introduce you to the series halfway through, thus replacing all nuance with hyperbole. It's a recap pointed very much at an audience who know exactly what did happen in previous episodes, who don't need to be caught up, but is more there to put you right back on that hype train quickly, recapturing the excitement felt at the end of episode 5. So you're especially hit by the isolation when we burst into the real beginning of episode 6's story. Bocchi sitting alone in a small shrine, wondering how she'll shift her ticket quota for the gig. How indeed when she has no friends? Who possibly will she give the tickets to? Well, her only friends seemingly are her parents, who bought the first 2 of the 5 tickets she needs to shift, and her bandmates who are in the studio wondering where she is throughout most of the episode. And where she is, at least at the beginning of the episode, is outside trying to distribute the 3 remaining tickets, but hasn't got past hiding alone in a shrine staring down at her hand-drawn flyers. The chaos of her inner thoughts procrastinating is interrupted when a woman staggers into the otherwise empty shrine grounds before collapsing to the floor, begging for water and hangover medicine and food. Meet Kikuri. At face value, a laughable caricature of hard-partying rockers. Several years Bocchi's senior, brash, loud, confident and impetuous, but as with so many other things in Bocchi the Rock, concealing a deeper perspective on the music world. By the end, I was left with a shocking realisation of what her interactions with Bocchi throughout this episode really had been, but I'll save that revelation for the end, because what YouTuber doesn't build up suspense, right? At least to make you watch through to the end of the episode. Now, to lead up to said revelation, I'm going to point out a few key moments, so get ready and wait for them, if you don't mind. Initially, although Bocchi remains just about cordial and friendly enough to avoid confrontation with her brash, unwanted new company, she really just is looking for a way to shake off this nuisance and go back to her introverted woes. However, Kikuri, recovering from her hangover, just about enough to start drinking again at least, is too extroverted to let this happen, leading to a scene that, as with again so many other in Bocchi the Rock, every musician will relate to. As Bocchi attempts to slip away carefully, Kikuri notices the guitar on her back and thus that they are both musicians. Bocchi immediately panics at the realization that she's talking to an older bass player and that her brash new companion will now proceed to roughly handle her guitar and judge her unworthy in the process. This is a panic that any musician not showered in money from a young age will almost certainly know. See, the love you have for your first guitar is something many experience, but the equally common and less discussed feeling is that first time you have the guitar with you around, well, drunk people. A house party, a first gig, just with careless friends. That day, that moment, we all know it. Especially as a young musician, everyone even a couple of years older than you and a couple of drinks in will claim to know how to play guitar. They all claim to have deep opinions about music. They all spout loudly, and they will all want to show you how much of an expert they are by inspecting your beloved musical instrument with their fumbling, overconfident, drunken hands. Worse still, the possibility looms that they will just want to do this in order to talk down to you and thus seemingly elevate their own image of being so musically wise. We all know it, we all hate it, but we all have to admit that it rarely ends up as badly as our paranoia has us expect. It's usually just an awkward moment of telling someone that your guitar is currently in need of some repairs, or just trying to be modest, or just, please, I don't really want to get the guitar out right now. Some such lie, just as Bocchi tries in the heat of the moment here too. In this scene, however, despite Bocchi's life falling apart pretty much instantly, things play out kind of well. Kikuri delicately handles the guitar, something the direction knowingly takes time to show us. She compliments it before handing it back carefully and observing the love that Bocchi has shown the instrument. I said earlier to take note of a few key moments? Well, this is the first one, so take note. Following this, the two move on to sitting by the street side and chatting in a conversation that still is obviously more led by the older Kikuri, and so she moves the conversation on to gleefully explaining her 24/7 drinking cycle, the need to maintain a comfortable haze and how it allows her to forget the uncomfortable realities of life. Careers, marriage, societal woes, replaced by happiness, music, and the search for more alcohol. Herein, though, stereotypes aside, we see a difficult truth about life as a musician. See, there is a reason why so many musicians drink. Not all of them, no, but an abnormally large percentage of those fretboard warriors who maintain a solid schedule of gigs but never make it big, the local heroes. A large number of them like a good large number of drinks. I remember being asked to help a band here in Japan who were all in their early 40s and had been going since their early 20s. They had decent songs, music videos, but also nothing had progressed in those 2 decades. They played the same 10 old venues over and over. Their videos had all been directed by the same friend. Their fans were the same group of people they'd always been, and every penny they made from every gig was drunk away in after parties that went through the night, turning every profitable event into, a loss. "We have to do after parties for the fans," they would proclaim. The fans they would go drinking with after every show, but obviously they didn't need to do this. It was just a cycle. It was part of the comfortable delusion. The truth is that they were a group of misfits with talent, a group who had found a way to survive outside of the rigidity of normal life and all to the soundtrack of a small group of loyal fans cheering. But deep down, I think they knew that there was no future in where they were going. I ended up not working with them because it became clear they didn't really want to see any change. In fact, it turned out that the person who'd actually originally hired me was a concerned outside colleague who desperately wanted someone to kick them into gear. There could have been a brighter future, perhaps 10 years before, but it had become easier for them to rejoice in the adequate amount of success they had achieved rather than take the risks of attempting the next steps. In reality, the only thing progressing about them was their age, and once again, the alcohol can help you forget that. All you notice is what's right in front of your face right now. People tell you did a great show tonight and you're a star, so you feel like a star. People band together and talk about the exciting things you can do next, and you believe in those possibilities. You likely even believe that things will get even better just around the corner. All the amazing things you'll do tomorrow once the party ends and you sober up. So you don't sober up. Sorry for the downer, it's just a sad truth that many musicians, just like actors or the modern raft of social media creators, just want to escape the pressure of living a normal life. But being a success in any field often brings pressure and hard work. So Kikuri is actually the voice of a lot of people who just want to live without that pressure, who you could say just want to be numbed to it, or maybe they just want to live in the moment forever. finding the pleasure in living in the moment rather than having to deal with all of the pressures that come with a future of having to build up towards big lofty goals that maybe you don't necessarily want to or need to reach. Bocchi is focused on the future though. She is focused on goals. She wants to make it big. That's the main thing driving her. And as she pictures her possible future as an alcoholic, as a regretful middle-aged woman pining for lost opportunities amongst a pile of empty chew-high cans, in that moment we see the hope and positivity that drive the otherwise timid-seeming Bocchi pushing through. As Kikuri extols the virtues of alcohol, Bocchi questions what kind of happiness this really is. Kikuri suggests that when Bocchi is old enough, she'll be a fellow drinker, but Bocchi seems terrified of what that future would even look like. Oh, and that's point 2 if you're still taking notes. But as the conversation moves along, and upon hearing that Bocchi is having trouble shifting tickets for her gig, Kikuri suggests a spontaneous street performance, right there and then. Confidently and immediately, she's on the phone, getting amplifiers delivered before calling out for the attention of passers-by. As much as Bocchi herself tries to dodge the invite to play live, Kikuri sweeps her up into it. It's also impromptu that there's no chance to escape, but that's not to say that Kikuri doesn't acknowledge Bocchi's fear of playing live. She just doesn't want to give her young new friend any excuses to back down or shy away. With a kind voice and a big smile, Kikuri uses her resourcefulness and experience to grab Hitori by the metaphorical scruff of the neck and make her do it. Oh, and that's point 3, so take note, I guess. Anyway, then as they play together, we get another scene where Bocchi the Rock really shows the power of music as a universal language that everyone speaks in their own way. The notes start to flow, a few people stop to look, and we see a tapestry of different worlds collide. In her head, Hitori observes Kikuri's confidence simply improvising to a song she doesn't even know, and how she enjoys just simply living in that moment of playing her bass. At the same time, Kikuri notices Hitori's talent and how the quiet introvert who couldn't bear to sell her tickets is capable of stopping people in the street with her sheer expression in her music, if not with her words. But the picture is further rounded out by the audience itself, notably 2 girls who stop to listen. One in particular shouting support upon seeing how nervous Bocchi is and wanting to really give her more energy. And this does help Bocchi come out of her shell a little bit more as she hears the voice from the crowd. It's funny because this moment actually maybe doesn't relate so much to overseas audience who wouldn't know that it's somewhat unusual for someone in a crowd to shout out during a performance. Whereas in Western gigs we're used to people shouting and screaming during shows to show their support, in Japan the audience for the best part remains silent throughout the songs, only singing along when cued to do so, or cheering between the actual songs to show their support. I've even seen overseas people coming to gigs here and being in the middle of the room, shouting along to the music, to turn around and notice that everyone around them is pretty much dancing silently. And yeah, that's pretty much the normal here. So it was kind of a big sign when you saw that member of the audience just standing on the street shouting support for Bocchi, and thus why the audience member's friend quickly chastises her for doing so. But hey, although this isn't necessarily the norm, and I certainly wouldn't recommend you doing it when you come to gigs in Japan, even surprisingly a lot of the rock shows, most of the rock shows, this particular moment does actually show a big sign of how the audience does react to the musician. And, you know, it shows how much Bocchi needs to hear those little voices of support, especially from a member of the audience who is just stopping of their own free will to listen to her music for no other reason than because they like the sound and ultimately because they like her. And ultimately, come the end of Kikuri and Bocchi's live busking show on the street, those 2 girls from the audience, they step up and they buy 2 tickets for Kisokuban's upcoming show, with Kikuri herself taking the last one, thus cementing their friendship and her wish to see Bocchi again. There's a nice little reference to the show stopping because of the police moving in and Kikuri knowingly citing how the police look mad, but it's not really a problem. And this is actually quite accurate in that busking is not allowed in most of Tokyo, and the police will make it clear you are doing something wrong, but there rarely are any consequences. They know this happens a lot. They're more having to show simply that the law is important and you have to agree to move along, and that's about the end of that. But with that, Bocchi's day ends. Notably, the rest of the band hardly making an appearance in the episode, with exception to a few short clips peppered in between of them discussing Hitori, her struggles with people, and coming to the awareness that there is no way she could shift that ticket quota on her own, so they shouldn't hold it against her when she inevitably doesn't and they see her at the next band practice. Those few scenes aside though, this episode focuses very much on Bocchi having her own personal journey, having an experience organically and letting this isolated story come to an end peacefully as the sun sets and fireworks burst across the nighttime skyline in the distance. So now we've covered the plot points, I teased a deeper meaning to Kikuri's character earlier, and I guess now would be a good time to pay that off. As with all such built-up reveals though, I doubt my final conclusion will be so much a surprise, and I'm sure it may have already occurred to you as you watched, but this small observation I want to give is the window through which I want to frame the entire episode. The most important point of who these characters really are to each other, brought to the front and to the centre. See, I mentioned Kikuri's drunken but joyous daily cycle and the suggestion that she's comfortably numb to reality, yet she's sensitive to Bocchi's struggles and unexpectedly invested in Bocchi's success, assuring she doesn't become a victim of her shy self-doubts. Kikuri totally turns Bocchi's day around, and admittedly all under the guise that Bocchi had supposedly saved her life earlier, but really it's just that she's a good woman, and likely relatable to more than just drunks. Although portrayed as only a few years older than Bocchi, that being an artistic decision I think was mostly made so that they can play together as relative peers, the truth is that Kikuri speaks the voice of a hidden generation of 30 and 40-something-year-old musicians who didn't quite make it, who fill the local venue circuits, long since rejecting the middle-class ladder. Family, kids, house, it might well happen, but it's not exactly the most important thing to them. They gave their life to music, but it's something that doesn't always give that much back in the long term, just in the short term that they're enjoying it. Just like, say, a carton of sake. An array of people with a talent for which the market is oversaturated, but who will get by in their own way. Anyway, in conclusion, see, I will get to the point, I promise. Kikuri, as much as she is a caricature, is one built from very real parts. Under the quirky anarchy, she's portrayed looking fondly back at the freshness of youth. Although the characters of Bocchi and Kikuri obviously have several differences, this feels more like a time travel movie, where a person goes back to talk to their younger self, give the encouragement needed, a nudge in the right direction. In reality, the future doesn't have all the answers, yes, but Kikuri sees herself in Bocchi. She even acknowledges as much at one point. What Bocchi sees as Kikuri's confusing propensity for sympathy is in reality a heartfelt empathy and understanding, perhaps even a tacit acknowledgement that Bocchi could soar higher than she has with the right opportunities. I guess the reason I wanted to frame the episode more through that light, through that lens, is because it sparked so many thoughts and memories of people I've met along the way. Again, not exact clones of Kikuri, but who found that same place, adrift from normality on a raft filled with guitars. This episode's interactions between the two characters made it more than a bit clear that the ever-knowing writers of Bocchi the Rock were channeling something a little bit deeper, and I think that's what it was. The delicacy with which Kikuri handles Bocchi's guitar, the enthusiasm she has for Bocchi to busk and open up. She's talking to a younger her. And yet, she's still a victim of her own cycle, encouraging things like Bocchi drinking too. Her advice will always be a little tainted by her own errors, yes, but she's looking at a younger self and wanting that person to do well. If you're learning to play music, you will find your Kikuri somewhere along the line, I promise. And if you already did, I'd love to hear the story of your Kikuris in the comments. Your older mentors who've perhaps made their own mistakes and yet are very much there to make sure you don't. As this episode concludes though, Bocchi's filled with the confidence and joy for having shifted all 5 tickets, but also for having made a real world connection to an audience standing in front of her rather than just behind a computer screen. And Kikuri's mission is therefore somewhat completed also. The rest of the band admittedly worry about Bocchi and are preparing to show her kindness upon her return, but Bocchi has done something on this day that the other 3 Kisoku band members haven't. She's taken a first-hand glimpse at the future, for better or for worse. It's like that scene from The Christmas Carol with the ghost of Christmases to come. This is the ghost of music to come. It may or may not be the thing that will happen to Bocchi, but she's looked at it head on and addressed it. So this episode went to a place that I didn't expect. It delivered an emotional connection I couldn't have seen coming, and it really spoke to a universal truth of music. The good of it, the bad, and the respect that all decent musicians have for each other throughout. So I look forward to seeing what the next few episodes bring and sharing them with you. But as ever at the end, I wanted to firstly thank you all so much for watching. Again, this video took ages to make and get out, as I'm sure you probably noticed, but I'll be moving to a new room soon and hopefully we'll be able to become more reliable at creating a schedule and releasing these videos at some point soon. I just honestly appreciate that you guys watch these and give such wonderful comments and support. As mentioned, I have those reviews of the following episodes coming up soon, a video from Enoshima, a few dives into some of your wonderful comments, and more Bocchi content, as well as maybe some other things. Again though, thank you so much, and I'll see you soon. Promise.